Sophia Rodriguez lay perfectly still in the king-sized bed she'd shared with Derek Thompson for 8 years. Her breathing deliberately slow, and even as the blue glow from his phone illuminated his face in the darkness. For 3 weeks now, she'd noticed the pattern. Every night around 11:30, just when he thought she was asleep, Derek would roll away from her and begin typing furiously on his device, his fingers dancing across the screen with an urgency he'd never shown when responding to her messages. The soft ping of incoming texts would continue well past midnight, each notification sending a small jolt through Sophia's chest as she maintained her facade of peaceful slumber. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tonight felt different. Tonight she'd positioned herself just right to catch glimpses of the screen's reflection in the bedroom mirror across from their bed. Tonight she would finally see what had been stealing her husband's attention, his affection, and increasingly his presence from their marriage. The name at the top of his chat thread made her stomach drop like a stone into ice water. Natalie Park. Derek's new colleague from the downtown Denver office, the marketing director he'd mentioned, perhaps too often during recent dinner conversations, always with a bright enthusiasm that seemed to bypass any mention of Sophia's own accomplishments or interests. Through the mirror's reflection, Sophia watched Derek type responses to messages that made him smile in ways she hadn't seen directed toward her in months. The casual intimacy of their exchange was unmistakable, even from her limited view. Inside jokes, playful emojis, and the kind of rapid-fire banter that spoke of hours spent building a connection that had clearly progressed far beyond professional courtesy. When Derek finally set his phone aside and settled into sleep, Sophia remained wide awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of her discovery pressed down on her chest like a physical force. The following morning arrived with Derek's usual routine of rushing through breakfast while scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging Sophia's presence as she prepared his coffee exactly the way he preferred it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, served in the ceramic mug she'd handmade during a pottery class she'd taken years ago, back when Derek still encouraged her creative pursuit. Now, watching him gulp the coffee without even a thank you, she wondered when appreciation had become expectation, when partnership had become servitude, and when her husband had become a stranger who shared her bed while building intimacy with someone else. The morning after her devastating discovery, Sophia moved through her daily routine like an actress playing a role she'd outgrown. Derek kissed her cheek with the same distracted peck he'd given her for months, his mind already elsewhere as he grabbed his briefcase and headed to his Mercedes. Their spacious Denver home, with its carefully curated modern furniture and pristine white walls, felt more like a museum than a living space. Every surface gleamed with the kind of perfection that required constant maintenance, leaving no room for the messy creativity that had once defined Sophia's personality. She'd given up her freelance graphic design business 3 years into their marriage, when Derek's promotion to senior financial advisor had come with longer hours and increased social obligations. He'd needed a wife who could manage their household, coordinate dinner parties with his colleagues, and present the image of success that his firm valued. Gradually, Sophia had transformed herself from an independent artist with a growing client base into the perfect corporate spouse, trading her colorful bohemian wardrobe for neutral tones and tailored pieces that complemented Derek's conservative aesthetic. The irony wasn't lost on her that Natalie Park, based on Derek's descriptions, was everything Sophia had been encouraged to stop being: creative, dynamic, passionate about her work, and apparently unafraid to pursue what she wanted, even if it belonged to someone else. As Sophia sat in their immaculate kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of a life she'd helped build but no longer recognized as her own, she realized that Derek hadn't fallen for someone different from his wife. He'd fallen for someone who embodied the woman Sophia used to be, before she'd systematically erased those qualities to become what he claimed to want. The evidence continued mounting over the following days as Sophia became a detective in her own home. Derek's behavior grew increasingly careless, his excitement about his secret relationship overriding his usual caution. Phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room working late on projects that seemed to require an unusual amount of face-to-face collaboration, and weekend golf games that stretched far longer than 18 holes could reasonably explain. The most damning evidence came when she found a receipt in his jacket pocket for dinner at Elevation, Denver's most romantic restaurant, on a night when he'd claimed to be entertaining clients at a sports bar. Confronting Derek directly felt pointless when she could predict his response with painful accuracy. He would deny, deflect, and ultimately turn the situation around to become her fault for being suspicious, paranoid, or unreasonably demanding. Their relationship had become a carefully choreographed dance where Sophia had learned to avoid any steps that might disrupt the illusion of harmony Derek insisted on maintaining. Raising uncomfortable truths or express a satisfaction with their dynamic inevitably resulted in lectures about gratitude, reminders of the comfortable lifestyle his success provided, and subtle suggestions that her emotional needs were excessive or unrealistic. Instead of confrontation, Sophia began planning. For the first time in years, she accessed the old laptop where she'd stored her design portfolio, amazed to discover that her creative work still sparked joy even after years of dormancy. Client testimonials from her former business reminded her of skills she'd possessed, problems she'd solved, and the satisfaction she'd felt when her creative vision aligned with successful outcomes. The woman described in those reviews bore little resemblance to the person she'd become, someone who spent her days managing Derek's schedule and maintaining a home that felt more like a stage set than a sanctuary. Late one Thursday night, as Derek typed furiously to Natalie while believing Sophia was asleep, she made a decision that would change everything. Rather than continue gathering evidence of his betrayal or planning dramatic confrontations that would likely end with her apologizing for disturbing his peace, Sophia chose a different path entirely. She would reclaim the life she'd surrendered, piece by piece, starting with the creative passion Derek had convinced her to abandon for the sake of their marriage. The next morning, Derek left for what he claimed was a weekend business conference in Colorado Springs. Sophia suspected the trip involved Natalie, but instead of spending the weekend torturing herself with images of their romantic getaway, she drove to the storage unit where her art supplies had been gathering dust for years. Boxes of paints, brushes, sketchbooks, and pottery tools emerged from their exile like buried treasure. Among them she found brochures for an intensive pottery workshop in Asheville, North Carolina, something she'd bookmarked years ago, but never pursued due to Derek's concerns about the cost and time commitment. The workshop started the following Monday and ran for 6 weeks, offering advanced instruction in wheel throwing, glazing techniques, and kiln firing. More importantly, it was located far enough from Denver to provide complete separation from her current life while she figured out her next step. The old Sophia would have asked Derek's permission, adjusted her plans around his schedule, and probably abandoned the idea entirely when he expressed reservation. The new Sophia, the one who'd spent weeks watching her husband fall in love with someone else, simply booked her flight and workshop enrollment using the emergency credit card Derek didn't know she still maintained. When Derek returned from his weekend away with Natalie, glowing with the satisfaction of a man who believed he was successfully managing multiple relationships, he found Sophia's note on the kitchen counter. Short, direct, and surprisingly calm, it informed him that she'd gone to North Carolina for an extended pottery workshop and would contact him when she was ready to discuss their future. No accusations, no emotional appeals, no demands for explanation. Just a simple statement of intent that left Derek staring at the paper in confusion, perhaps realizing for the first time that his compliant wife had developed a will of her own. The flight to Asheville felt like awakening from a long, suffocating dream. As the plane climbed above Denver's familiar skyline, Sophia felt layers of expectation and constraint falling away with each mile of distance. For 8 years she'd lived within the boundaries Derek had established for their relationship, accepting his definitions of success, happiness, and appropriate behavior for a wife in his social circle. Now, suspended between her old life and whatever awaited her in the mountains of North Carolina, Sophia experienced a lightness she'd forgotten was possible. Her phone buzzed constantly during the flight, as Derek's messages evolved from confusion to irritation to barely controlled anger. He'd expected her to be waiting for his return, ready to resume their established patterns without question or complaint. The idea that she might have her own plans, her own needs, her own capacity for independent action, seemed to genuinely shock him. His text revealed more about their relationship dynamic than years of therapy might have accomplished, each message confirming that Derek had viewed her as a supporting character in his story rather than the protagonist of her own life. By the time Sophia's plane touched down in Asheville, Derek's messages had taken on a threatening tone. He demanded her immediate return, questioned her mental stability, and suggested that her behavior was evidence of a breakdown that required his intervention. The man who'd been conducting an emotional affair while lying to his wife daily was now positioning himself as the injured party, betrayed by her unreasonable decision to pursue personal interests without his approval. The absurdity of his outrage might have been amusing if it hadn't been so painfully familiar. Asheville welcomed Sophia with mountain air that carried the scent of wildflowers and possibility. The pottery studio where she'd enrolled was located in the Arts District, surrounded by galleries, craft shops and cafes that celebrated creativity rather than corporate success. Walking through the neighborhood felt like entering a world where her abandoned dreams weren't just accepted but encouraged. Street musicians played on corners, murals covered building walls, and conversations overheard in coffee shops focused on artistic projects and personal fulfillment, rather than profit margins and professional advance. The studio itself was everything Derek would have dismissed as impractical and unprofitable. Housed in a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and walls of windows that bathed the space in natural light, it buzzed with the energy of creation. Potter's wheels lined the main floor, surrounded by shelves of works in progress, while kilns and glazing areas occupied separate rooms designed for each stage of the ceramic process. The scent of clay and wood smoke created an atmosphere that felt both ancient and immediate, connecting Sophia to countless generations of artisans who'd found meaning in shaping earth and fire into functional beauty. Rosa Fernandez, the workshop instructor, greeted Sophia with the kind of warm attention that had been absent from her interactions for years. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, and hands stained permanently with clay, Rosa possessed the confidence that came from mastering a craft through decades of dedicated practice. Her eyes held the brightness of someone who'd never lost her enthusiasm for teaching, and her initial assessment of Sophia's skill level was both encouraging and realistic. The first day of class revealed how much Sophia had missed the tactile satisfaction of creating something with her hand. The clay responded to pressure and moisture, transforming from shapeless earth into functional vessels through patience and skill. Unlike the digital design work that had once been her profession, pottery demanded physical presence and acceptance of imperfection. Each piece carried the unique marks of its creator's hands, making mass production impossible, and ensuring that every bowl, vase, or cup would be truly one of a kind. Rosa's teaching style emphasized experimentation over perfection, encouraging students to push boundaries and learn from failures rather than avoiding risk. Her own work, displayed throughout the studio, demonstrated the kind of artistic evolution that came from years of continuous growth and willingness to embrace new challenges. Functional pieces sat alongside purely decorative sculptures, showing how technical mastery could serve both practical needs and creative expression without compromising either goal. The other workshop participants came from various backgrounds and experience levels, but all shared the same hunger for hands-on creation that had drawn Sophia to pottery years earlier. A retired teacher seeking new challenges, a burned-out tech worker exploring career alternatives, a young mother reclaiming time for personal interests, and several local artists expanding their skill sets created a community bound by shared purpose rather than social obligation or professional network. Evening conversations over local craft beer and farm-to-table dinners revealed stories of transition, risk-taking, and the courage required to prioritize personal fulfillment over external expectations. Sophia found herself sharing details about her marriage and recent discoveries that she'd never voiced aloud, receiving support and understanding from near strangers who recognized the patterns of self-diminishment she described. For the first time in years, her feelings were validated rather than dismissed, her choices supported rather than questioned. Derek's phone calls grew increasingly aggressive as days passed without Sophia's immediate return to Denver. He alternated between promises of couples counseling and threats of financial consequences, apparently believing that the right combination of manipulation and pressure would restore his control over the situation. His complete inability to understand her motivations or acknowledge his own behavior confirmed every doubt Sophia had developed about their relationship's foundation. When Derek finally admitted to his relationship with Natalie, he framed it as a consequence of Sophia's emotional distance rather than a choice he'd made independently. According to his version of events, Sophia's focus on household management and social obligations had left him feeling unappreciated and misunderstood, driving him to seek connection elsewhere. The fact that he'd encouraged her to abandon her career and creative interest to become the perfect corporate wife seemed irrelevant to his narrative of victimization. The conversation that ended their marriage took place over a video call that Derek had insisted on scheduling, apparently believing that seeing her face would somehow restore his influence over her decision. Instead, he found himself confronting a woman who'd spent 2 weeks rediscovering her strength and clarity of purpose. Sophia's calm responses to his emotional manipulation and her refusal to accept responsibility for his choices left Derek speechless, perhaps recognizing for the first time that the compliant wife he'd taken for granted no longer existed. When Derek finally hung up in frustration, Sophia felt a profound sense of relief rather than loss. The marriage she was ending had been built on her willingness to minimize herself to accommodate his needs, creating an unsustainable dynamic that had slowly drained her vitality and confidence. His betrayal with Natalie had simply revealed the fundamental inequality that had always existed in their relationship, forcing her to confront truths she'd been avoiding for years. The pottery workshop became Sophia's bridge between her old life and whatever came next. Each day brought technical improvements and artistic discoveries that reminded her of capabilities she'd forgotten she possessed. The muscle memory of centering clay on the wheel returned gradually, along with the meditative focus that throwing pottery required. Hours passed unnoticed as she shaped vessel after vessel, learning to read the clay's responses and adjust her techniques accordingly. Rosa's guidance extended beyond technical instruction to include philosophical discussions about the role of creativity and a meaningful life. Her own journey from corporate graphic designer to master potter provided a roadmap for the kind of transition Sophia was contemplating. Rosa had made the change gradually, building her pottery skills and client base while maintaining her day job, until her ceramic work generated enough income to support her chosen lifestyle. The possibility of building a new career around pottery excited Sophia in ways her graphic design work never had. While digital design was certainly creative, it lacked the physical engagement and permanent tangibility that working with clay provided. Each fired piece would exist for decades or centuries, carrying the mark of its creator long after computer files had become obsolete. The thought of contributing something lasting and beautiful to the world felt more meaningful than designing marketing materials for products she'd never used. As her first month in Asheville drew to a close, Sophia faced the decision of whether to return to Denver and attempt to rebuild her marriage or continue pursuing the path she'd discovered in the mountains. Derek had moved in with Natalie, making the choice somewhat easier, but practical considerations still weighed heavily on her mind. Their shared assets, the house they'd bought together, and the social connections she'd cultivated as his wife all represented significant losses if she chose to start over completely. The decision crystallized during a conversation with Carlos Fernandez, Rosa's husband and the studio's business manager. A former investment banker who'd left Wall Street to help his wife build their pottery enterprise, Carlos understood the financial realities of choosing artistic fulfillment over conventional success. His practical advice about building sustainable creative businesses combined with genuine enthusiasm for Sophia's artistic development, offering both encouragement and realistic planning strategies. Together, they developed a preliminary business plan for Sophia's transition from corporate wife to independent pottery art. The numbers were sobering compared to Derek's financial advisor's salary, but they represented something his income never could: complete autonomy over her time, energy, and creative expression. The choice between comfortable dependence and challenging independence seemed obvious once Sophia framed it as a question of personal integrity rather than financial security. When Sophia called Derek to inform him of her decision to file for divorce and remain in North Carolina, his response confirmed that she'd made the right choice. His immediate threats about legal battles over their assets and social consequences for her reputation revealed the controlling nature she'd accommodated for years. The man who'd claimed to love her was now prepared to destroy her financially and socially rather than accept her right to choose her own path. The conversation marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Sophia Rodriguez Thompson was ready to become simply Sophia Rodriguez again, reclaiming not just her name, but the creative spirit and independent strength that had attracted Derek in the first place. The mountain town of Asheville offered fertile ground for growing the life she'd always wanted but never had the courage to pursue, until betrayal forced her to choose between settling for less or reaching for more. The divorce papers arrived via overnight delivery on a Tuesday morning that dawned gray and drizzling, turning the mountain landscape around Asheville into a watercolor painting of muted greens and blues.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Sophia signed for the envelope with hands still bearing traces of yesterday's clay work, the earthy residue under her fingernails, a stark contrast to the legal documents that would officially dissolve 8 years of marriage. Derek had moved swiftly once he realized she wouldn't be returning to Denver, hiring the most aggressive divorce attorney his firm recommended, and immediately freezing their joint accounts in what his lawyer termed protective measures. The financial reality hit Sophia like cold mountain water. The emergency credit card she'd used for her flight and workshop enrollment had been canceled, leaving her with exactly $347 in cash and a checking account that Derek's legal team had successfully argued should be frozen pending asset division. The comfortable safety net she'd taken for granted throughout their marriage had vanished overnight, replaced by the stark arithmetic of survival on minimal resources in a town where she knew virtually no one outside the pottery studio. Rosa found Sophia sitting in the studio's small kitchen area the next morning, staring at the legal papers spread across the worn wooden table while nursing a cup of coffee that had grown cold hours earlier. The older woman's weathered hands moved gently as she gathered the documents, scanning their contents with the kind of practical assessment that came from decades of navigating life's unexpected challenges. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she read through Derek's demands and restrictions, shaking her head at what she clearly recognized as financial warfare disguised as legal procedure. Without being asked, Rosa pulled out her phone and dialed a number she apparently knew by heart, speaking rapidly in Spanish to someone who responded with equal urgency. Within 20 minutes, a compact woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes arrived at the studio, introducing herself as Maria Santos, an attorney who specialized in helping women navigate contentious divorces. Her initial consultation fee was waived after Rosa explained Sophia's circumstances, and her assessment of Derek's legal strategy was both reassuring and sobering. Derek's attempt to freeze all marital assets would likely succeed in the short term, Maria explained, but his claims of abandonment and financial irresponsibility would be difficult to sustain given his own admitted infidelity. The process would take months to resolve, however, leaving Sophia in financial limbo while the courts determined equitable distribution of their shared property. Her immediate need was basic survival funding, followed by long-term planning for rebuilding her financial independence from scratch. The conversation with Maria crystallized just how thoroughly Sophia had surrendered her economic autonomy during her marriage. Her graphic design business had been dissolved when Derek convinced her to focus on their household management, eliminating both her client base and her professional network. Their house, bank accounts, investment portfolios, and even the cars were titled in ways that favored Derek's legal position, leaving Sophia with minimal assets she could access independently. The magnitude of starting over at 34 with essentially nothing felt overwhelming in moments of clarity between the adrenaline-fueled determination that had carried her through the initial weeks of separation. Lying awake in the small bedroom above Rosa's studio that had become her temporary home, Sophia sometimes questioned whether the freedom she'd gained was worth the security she'd lost. The logical part of her mind cataloged everything she would need to rebuild: income, housing, transportation, health insurance, and a dozen other practical necessities that had been Derek's responsibility for years. Yet each morning brought renewed conviction that she'd made the right choice. Working with clay required complete presence in the moment, leaving no mental space for the anxiety spirals that threatened to overwhelm her during idle hours. The physical demands of centering, pulling, and shaping vessels provided an outlet for the emotional turbulence of dismantling her old life while constructing something entirely new. Each successful piece that emerged from the kiln felt like evidence that she possessed capabilities beyond those Derek had acknowledged or encouraged. Rose's generosity extended far beyond providing temporary housing and studio access. She began including Sophia in the business aspects of running a pottery operation, sharing decades of hard-won knowledge about pricing, marketing, customer relations, and the seasonal fluctuations that affected handmade craft sales. The financial margins were thin compared to Derek's corporate salary, but the connection between effort and reward felt more honest than the complex financial instruments Derek managed for wealthy clients. The Asheville arts community proved surprisingly supportive of newcomers willing to contribute their skills and energy to the collective creative ecosystem. Word spread quickly about Sophia's situation and background, leading to introductions with gallery owners, craft fair organizers, and established artists who remembered their own challenging early years. The informal network of mutual assistance that existed among local creatives contrasted sharply with the competitive professional environment Derek had always described as normal and necessary. Priya Patel, who owned a small gallery specializing in functional ceramics, offered Sophia her first opportunity to earn money from pottery sales. The consignment arrangement was simple. Priya would display and sell Sophia's work in exchange for a 40% commission, with payment rendered when pieces sold rather than when they were delivered. The terms were far from ideal financially, but they provided a pathway toward economic independence that didn't require Derek's permission or involvement. Sophia's first pieces for Priya's gallery reflected her emotional state during those early weeks of separation. Simple forms with subtle imperfections that spoke to the beauty found in resilience rather than flawless execution. Bowls with slightly irregular rims, mugs with handles that bore the clear imprint of their maker's fingers, and small vases with glazes that had flowed in unexpected but pleasing directions. Each piece carried the authentic marks of human creation that mass production could never replicate. The night before her work debuted at Priya's gallery, Sophia experienced a panic attack that left her gasping for air in the studio's parking lot. The reality of putting her creative work up for public judgment felt exponentially more vulnerable than the graphic design projects she'd completed for distant clients. These ceramic pieces carried pieces of her soul, formed during hours of meditation and recovery from the trauma of discovering Derek's betrayal. Rejection of her pottery would feel like rejection of her essential self in ways that losing a design contract never could. Rosa found Sophia sitting on the studio steps, breathing slowly and deliberately while staring at the mountain silhouette against the star-filled sky. Her approach was unhurried and calm, settling beside Sophia without immediately speaking. The silence stretched comfortably between them, until Sophia finally voiced her fears about the gallery opening, about starting over, about the possibility that she'd made a catastrophic mistake in leaving the security of marriage for the uncertainty of independence. Rosa's response came in the form of a story about her own transition from corporate design work to pottery mastery, a journey that had taken 7 years and included multiple failures, financial setbacks, and moments of profound doubt. Her first pottery sales had been disasters, she admitted with a laugh, producing pieces so flawed that even friends had difficulty finding positive things to say. The difference between failure and eventual success hadn't been natural talent or perfect technique, but rather the willingness to continue learning despite disappointment and rejection. The gallery opening the following evening drew a modest but enthusiastic crowd of locals who appreciated handmade crafts and supported emerging artists. Sophia's nervousness dissipated as she watched people handling her pieces, running their fingers along the glazed surfaces and discussing the subtle variations in form that made each item unique. The first sale, a simple coffee mug purchased by an elderly gentleman who admired its comfortable weight and balance, felt like validation of everything she'd risked to pursue this new path. By the end of the evening, 6 of her 12 pieces had sold, generating enough income to cover a week's worth of basic expenses, while proving that strangers were willing to pay for the work her hands had created. The buyers were diverse, a young couple furnishing their first apartment, a restaurant owner looking for unique serving pieces, and several collectors who recognized quality craftsmanship regardless of the artist's reputation or credentials. Each transaction felt like a small miracle, transforming clay and glaze into the currency of survival. Derek's reaction to news of her pottery sales, delivered through his attorney rather than direct communication, revealed the depth of his need to control their narrative. His legal team characterized her art sales as evidence of hidden assets and deceptive financial planning, suggesting that her claims of economic hardship were fraudulent attempts to manipulate the divorce proceeding. The accusation was so absurd that Maria Santos burst into laughter when she read the court filing, but it demonstrated Derek's determination to punish Sophia for choosing independence over compliance. The legal harassment escalated as Derek realized that financial pressure alone wouldn't force Sophia to return to their marriage. Private investigators began appearing at the pottery studio and gallery, documenting her activities and questioning Rosa about their living arrangement. Derek's attorney filed motions challenging every aspect of Sophia's post-separation choices, from her temporary housing to her nascent business activities, creating a constant stream of legal expenses that stretched Maria's pro bono commitment to its limit. The stress of ongoing litigation combined with financial uncertainty began affecting Sophia's work quality and creative confidence. Pieces that had flowed effortlessly from her hands during the first weeks now collapsed on the wheel or cracked during firing, reflecting the internal turbulence that she struggled to compartmentalize. Sleep became elusive as her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios and legal strategies, leaving her exhausted during the precise work that pottery demanded. Rosa recognized the signs of creative paralysis that often affected artists facing external pressure and personal crisis. Her intervention came in the form of a gentle ultimatum. Sophia could continue struggling alone with problems that were affecting her artistic development, or she could accept the kind of community support that had sustained mountain artists for generations. The choice between proud independence and humble interdependence would determine whether she survived this transitional period with her creative spirit intact. The support network that Rosa assembled around Sophia included practical assistance and emotional encouragement from sources she never would have expected. Carlos negotiated a work trade arrangement that provided Sophia with studio access and kiln firing in exchange for administrative help with their business operations. Helen Chang, a former therapist who'd retired to Asheville to pursue metalworking, offered free counseling sessions to help Sophia process the trauma of betrayal and develop coping strategies for the divorce proceeding. Other community members contributed skills and resources according to their abilities and Sophia's needs. The owner of a local health food store provided groceries in exchange for help with social media marketing, drawing on Sophia's graphic design background to create compelling visual content for the business. A mechanic who collected pottery offered free car maintenance for the used Honda Civic that Sophia purchased with her savings, ensuring reliable transportation to legal appointments and craft fair. The network of mutual aid that supported Sophia's survival during those difficult months operated on principles entirely foreign to Derek's worldview. Rather than formal contracts and calculated exchanges, relationships were built on trust, reciprocity, and genuine concern for community members' well-being. People helped because they understood that everyone occasionally needed assistance, and because they had confidence that their generosity would be returned when circumstances allowed. Sophia's legal battle with Derek intensified as he realized that cutting off her financial support hadn't produced the desired result of forcing her return to Denver. His attorney's tactics grew increasingly aggressive, filing motions that questioned Sophia's mental health, challenged her right to remain in North Carolina, and demanded detailed accounting of every dollar she earned or spent. The harassment was clearly designed to exhaust her resources and resolve, rather than achieve any legitimate legal objective. Maria Santos responded to Derek's escalating legal warfare by documenting his pattern of financial abuse and emotional manipulation, building a case that would ultimately strengthen Sophia's position in the divorce proceeding. The evidence of Derek's affair with Natalie, combined with his vindictive attempts to control Sophia's post-separation choices, painted a clear picture of his character that would influence the court's decisions about asset division and support obligations. The turning point came when Derek's private investigator overstepped legal boundaries by attempting to enter Rosa's studio after hours, triggering a security alarm and police response that resulted in trespassing charges. The incident provided concrete evidence of Derek's harassment campaign, while demonstrating the difference between his tactics and the supportive community Sophia had found in Asheville. Local news coverage of the incident portrayed Derek as a wealthy outsider using intimidation tactics against a woman trying to rebuild her life through honest, creative work. Community rallying around Sophia following the break-in incident exceeded anything she could have imagined during her isolated years as Derek's wife. The studio received an influx of visitors interested in supporting local artists, leading to increased sales and commissions that provided some financial stability during the ongoing legal proceeding. Local businesses began displaying signs supporting artists' rights and community safety, creating a collective response that made Derek's intimidation tactics counterproductive. Sophia's pottery work evolved during this period of external pressure and community support, developing distinctive characteristics that reflected her journey from controlled compliance to independent strength. Her glazing techniques incorporated the blues and greens of the mountain landscape that had become her sanctuary, while her forms grew more confident and expressive as her technical skills improved. Each piece carried the story of its creation during a time of personal transformation, making them compelling to buyers who appreciated art that emerged from authentic experience. The financial mathematics of her new life remained challenging despite growing sales and community support. Income fluctuated based on seasonal tourism patterns and the unpredictable nature of art sales, requiring careful budgeting and constant attention to expenses that had been invisible during her marriage to Derek. Yet the direct connection between her effort and her income felt more honest than the financial security that had depended entirely on Derek's continued approval of her behavior. Legal resolution of her divorce remained months away, but Sophia had already achieved something more valuable than any court judgment could provide. She had proven to herself that the strength and creativity Derek had systematically undermined were real and powerful enough to sustain independent life. The woman who had once apologized for having opinions or interests that inconvenienced her husband, now ran a small business, maintained meaningful friendships, and contributed valuable skills to a community that appreciated her authentic self. The approaching end of her second month in Asheville brought both reflection on how much had changed and anticipation of challenges still ahead. Sophia's temporary housing arrangement with Rosa would need to become more permanent or give way to independent living space she could afford on her unpredictable income. The legal proceedings with Derek would continue consuming time and emotional energy, while she attempted to build momentum in her pottery career. Most significantly, she would need to develop the technical skills and business acumen necessary to transform her promising beginning into sustainable long-term success. Yet sitting in the studio on a quiet evening, surrounded by pieces she'd created with her own hands and supported by friends who valued her for exactly who she was, Sophia felt a deep contentment that had been absent throughout her marriage. The security she'd gained was different from the financial safety Derek had provided, based on her own capabilities rather than another person's continued goodwill. The future remained uncertain, but it belonged entirely to her to shape according to her own values and dreams. Spring arrived in Asheville with an explosion of dogwood blossoms and warm afternoons that drew tourists from across the southeast, bringing with them the seasonal influx of revenue that sustained many local artists through leaner winter months. Sophia had settled into a rhythm of early morning studio time when the light was perfect for detail work, followed by afternoons at various craft markets and galleries throughout the region. Her hands had developed the calluses and muscle memory that marked serious pottery practitioners, while her eye had grown increasingly sophisticated in recognizing subtle variations in clay consistency, firing temperatures and glaze interaction. The small apartment she'd rented above a vintage bookstore on Haywood Road represented her first independent living space since college, a modest one-bedroom with slanted ceilings and windows that overlooked the downtown arts district. The rent consumed nearly half her monthly income, but the location provided walking access to galleries, supply stores, and the community of artists who had become her primary social circle. Unlike the pristine suburban home she'd shared with Derek, this space welcomed creative chaos and encouraged experimentation without concern for maintaining perfect appearances. Rosa had begun entrusting Sophia with increasingly complex technical responsibilities at the studio, including kiln loading and firing schedules that required precise timing and temperature control. The ancient gas kiln that dominated one corner of the workspace demanded intimate knowledge of its quirks and preferences, accumulated through years of careful observation and adjustment. Sophia learned to read the subtle color changes in test cones that indicated proper firing temperatures, and to judge by sound and smell when reduction cycles were proceeding correctly. The chemistry of glazes fascinated Sophia in ways that reminded her why she'd originally been drawn to graphic design, though working with ceramic materials engaged different sensory pathways than digital color theory. Each glaze formula represented a complex interaction between minerals, metal oxides, and firing conditions that could produce dramatically different results depending on application techniques and kiln atmosphere. Experimentation required careful record-keeping and patient acceptance of unexpected outcomes that sometimes surpassed intended effect. Carlos had begun including Sophia in business planning conversations that went far beyond her initial administrative assistance, recognizing her intuitive understanding of market dynamics and customer preferences. Her background in graphic design provided valuable perspective on branding and visual communication that complemented Rosa's artistic expertise and Carlos's financial management skills. Together, they developed strategies for expanding their customer base, while maintaining the authentic character that distinguished their work from mass-produced alternatives. The collaboration naturally evolved into discussions about Sophia's own business development, with Carlos offering guidance, based on his experience transitioning from corporate finance to arts entrepreneurship. His practical advice covered topics Derek had never addressed during their marriage: tax planning for irregular income, equipment purchasing strategies, insurance considerations for artist studio, and the seasonal cash flow management that kept creative businesses solvent through tourism fluctuation. Sophia's technical skills reached a milestone when Rosa invited her to participate in a collaborative installation for the annual Mountain Heritage Festival, Asheville's largest celebration of regional arts and crafts. The commission involved creating a series of large planters that would showcase native mountain plants while demonstrating advanced throwing and glazing techniques to festival visitors. The opportunity represented both artistic recognition and significant income potential, but it also required mastering vessel forms far larger than anything Sophia had previously attempted. The learning process pushed Sophia beyond her comfort zone in ways that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Large-scale throwing demanded different centering techniques, arm positioning, and clay preparation methods that challenged assumptions she'd developed about pottery fundamentals. Rosa's patient instruction combined with intensive practice sessions gradually built the strength and coordination necessary for handling substantial amounts of clay, while maintaining precise wall thickness and symmetrical form. The physical demands of large vessel creation transformed Sophia's body in ways that complemented the mental focus pottery required. Hours spent at the wheel developed core strength and shoulder stability that had been absent during her sedentary years as Derek's wife. The repetitive motions of wedging clay and centering forms became meditative practices that calmed anxiety while building confidence in her physical capabilities. Unlike the gym memberships Derek had purchased to maintain her appearance according to his preferences, this strength came from purposeful work that produced beautiful and functional results. Festival preparation introduced Sophia to aspects of the pottery community she hadn't previously encountered, including the network of suppliers, kiln sharing cooperatives, and technical specialists who supported individual artists' ambitious projects. The scale of her commission required clay purchases beyond Rosa's usual orders, connecting Sophia with regional suppliers who offered bulk pricing and specialized clay bodies formulated for specific applications.
These business relationships provided insights into the broader ecosystem that sustained mountain craft traditions. The glazing phase of the festival commission challenged Sophia to achieve consistent color results across multiple large pieces, while accommodating the firing limitations of Rosa's kiln. The mathematical precision required for mixing large batches of glaze reminded her of the systematic thinking that had made her successful in graphic design, though ceramic chemistry demanded additional variables related to application thickness, firing atmosphere, and cooling rates. Success required both technical knowledge and intuitive judgment, developed through experience with specific materials and equipment. Helen Chang had become a regular presence in Sophia's life, their weekly conversations evolving from crisis counseling to broader discussions about personal growth and creative development. Helen's own transition from psychology practice to metalworking provided perspective on the emotional challenges of career reinvention, particularly for women who had subordinated their identities to marriage relationships. Her insights helped Sophia recognize patterns of self-doubt and people-pleasing that continued influencing her decisions, even after leaving Derek. The therapeutic work revealed how thoroughly Derek's controlling behavior had infiltrated Sophia's sense of self-worth and decision-making processes. Years of having her opinions dismissed or overruled had created automatic responses of deference and self-censorship that persisted even in supportive environments. Recognizing these patterns allowed Sophia to consciously practice assertiveness and trust in her own judgment, skills that proved essential for navigating business negotiations and artistic collaboration. Helen's metalworking studio occupied a converted garage behind her cottage, filled with torches, anvils, and the controlled chaos that accompanied any serious making practice. Watching Helen shape silver and copper into elegant jewelry pieces provided Sophia with insights into how different materials responded to heat, pressure, and manipulation. The conversations that occurred during Helen's work sessions often produced breakthrough moments when pottery problems suddenly revealed their solutions through analogies to metalworking technique. The friendship with Helen opened doors to Asheville's broader arts community, including monthly gatherings where artists from various disciplines shared technical knowledge, collaboration opportunities, and moral support during challenging projects. These informal networks provided resources that no individual artist could afford independently: access to specialized equipment, bulk purchasing cooperatives, exhibition opportunities, and the collective wisdom accumulated through decades of creative practice. Sophia's participation in community events gradually shifted from nervous newcomer to contributing member whose skills and perspectives added value to group endeavors. Her graphic design background proved invaluable for creating promotional materials, while her fresh perspective on pottery challenged established artists to reconsider familiar techniques and approach it. The reciprocal nature of these relationships contrasted sharply with the one-sided dynamics that had characterized her marriage to Derek. The festival commission reached completion 3 weeks before the event, allowing time for final adjustments and the careful transport that large ceramic pieces require. The planters emerged from their final firing with the mountain-inspired glazes flowing perfectly across their surfaces, creating the organic color variations that made each piece unique while maintaining overall visual coherence across the series. Rose's pride in Sophia's achievement was evident in her decision to feature the planters prominently in the studio's festival booth, introducing Sophia to visitors as her apprentice and collaborator rather than student. Festival weekend brought crowds that exceeded all previous attendance records, drawn by perfect weather and a particularly strong lineup of regional artists and musicians. Sophia's planters attracted consistent attention from visitors who appreciated both their artistic merit and functional design, leading to commission inquiries that would sustain her income through the upcoming winter months. More importantly, the positive reception validated her artistic vision and technical competence in ways that built confidence for future ambitious projects. The success of the festival commission marked a turning point in Rosa and Carlos's perception of Sophia's role within their operation. Conversations about her future began incorporating the possibility of formal partnership rather than extended apprenticeship, recognizing her contributions to both artistic and business aspects of their work. The financial arrangement would need careful structuring to protect everyone's interests while acknowledging Sophia's growing investment in the studio's success and reputation. Preya Patel had been monitoring Sophia's artistic development with the keen eye of someone whose livelihood depended on identifying emerging talent before it became widely recognized. The gallery owner's interest in representing Sophia's work exclusively reflected both commercial instincts and genuine appreciation for the distinctive voice that was emerging through her pottery. The partnership discussions involved percentage splits, exhibition commitments, and marketing strategies that would position Sophia's work within Asheville's competitive arts market. The prospect of gallery representation brought both excitement and anxiety as Sophia contemplated the increased visibility and expectations that would accompany formal recognition as a professional artist. Her work would be judged not just by supportive community members, but by serious collectors and critics who demanded consistent quality and continuing artistic development. The pressure felt both motivating and intimidating, pushing her to refine techniques while maintaining the authenticity that made her pieces compelling. Legal proceedings with Derek had reached a phase where settlement negotiations were replacing courtroom battles, though his attorney continued pursuing vindictive strategies that seemed designed more to punish Sophia than protect Derek's financial interests. Maria Santos had documented a clear pattern of harassment and financial abuse that strengthened Sophia's position while demonstrating Derek's character to mediation officers. The evidence suggested that a favorable settlement was likely within the next few months, finally providing closure to the marriage that had ended emotionally long before legal proceedings began. The emotional distance from her divorce had grown substantially as Sophia's new life gained momentum and stability. Derek's attempts at manipulation and control felt increasingly irrelevant to someone who had proven her ability to create meaningful work, sustain important relationships, and contribute valuable skills to a community that appreciated her efforts. The woman who had once apologized for having opinions that inconvenienced her husband now negotiated business partnerships and artistic collaborations with confidence in her own judgment. Summer brought the peak tourist season that represented crucial income opportunities for all Asheville artists, with weekly craft fairs, gallery events, and studio tours that showcased regional talent to visitors from across the country. Sophia's work had evolved to include a distinctive line of functional pieces that incorporated mountain wildflower motifs into their glazing and surface treatment. The botanical themes resonated with tourists seeking authentic regional art, while allowing Sophia to express her growing connection to the landscape that had become her home. The technical complexity of her wildflower glazes required extensive experimentation with copper and iron oxides to achieve the subtle color variations that made each piece unique. The process involved multiple firings and careful masking techniques that prevented different glazes from running together inappropriately. Success rates were initially low as Sophia learned to control the various factors that influenced final results, but persistence gradually yielded the reliable techniques necessary for consistent production. Rosa's recommendation led to Sophia's acceptance into a prestigious summer workshop taught by a nationally recognized ceramic artist, whose technical innovations had influenced pottery practices for decades. The intensive 2-week program brought together advanced students from across the Southeast, creating an environment of concentrated learning and artistic challenge that pushed everyone to exceed their previous capability. The opportunity represented both a significant financial investment and a crucial step toward establishing her reputation beyond local markets. The workshop experience proved transformative in ways that extended far beyond technical skill development. Working alongside accomplished artists from diverse backgrounds provided perspective on different approaches to pottery while revealing the common dedication and passion that sustained serious creative practice. The instructors' critiques were demanding but constructive, identifying specific areas for improvement while acknowledging the distinctive qualities that made each student's work unique and valuable. Friendships formed during the workshop created a network of artistic colleagues who would provide ongoing support, collaboration opportunities, and honest feedback throughout Sophia's continuing development. The relationships transcended geographical boundaries through social media connections that allowed sharing of work in progress, technical questions, and celebration of achievement. These connections partially filled the professional isolation that individual studio practice often imposed on artists working in smaller communities. The workshop instructor's final evaluation included an invitation for Sophia to apply for an advanced residency program that would provide studio space, materials, stipend, and mentorship opportunities for emerging artists, showing exceptional promise. The residency would require relocating to North Carolina's coast for 3 months during the following year, presenting logistical challenges but offering accelerated artistic development that could establish her reputation nationally rather than just regional. Returning to Asheville after the workshop, Sophia found herself viewing her established routines and relationships with fresh perspective, gained through exposure to different approaches and higher standards of expectation. The mountain community that had nurtured her initial development now felt like a launching pad for broader ambitions, rather than a permanent sanctuary from the competitive art world. Her growing confidence suggested that she might be ready for challenges that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The evolution of her relationship with Rosa and Carlos reflected Sophia's transition from dependent student to capable collaborator, whose contributions enhanced their collective success. Studio responsibilities now included training newer students in basic techniques, while helping to develop curriculum for workshops that drew participants from throughout the region. Teaching others reinforced her own technical understanding while building communication skills that would prove valuable for future business development. The apartment above the bookstore had become a true home, filled with her own pottery, plants that thrived in the excellent light, and books on ceramic history and technique that fed her growing expertise. Unlike the designer-perfect spaces she'd inhabited with Derek, this environment welcomed experimentation and reflected her authentic interests rather than someone else's vision of appropriate aesthetics. The space felt alive with creative energy and personal history rather than sterile perfection. Evening walks through downtown Asheville provided daily reminders of how completely her life had transformed since those desperate early weeks, when survival seemed uncertain and artistic development felt like an impossible luxury. The galleries, studios, and cafes that had once intimidated her with their creative confidence now welcomed her as a contributing member of the community whose presence added value to collective endeavor. The sense of belonging was earned rather than granted, based on demonstrated commitment and continuing growth rather than social connections or financial status. Sophia's work had begun attracting attention from collectors and museums beyond the tourist market, indicating that her artistic development was progressing toward professional recognition that could sustain a lifetime career. The pieces selected for upcoming exhibitions demonstrated technical mastery combined with distinctive aesthetic vision that marked truly accomplished artists. Success felt both earned and surprising, built through thousands of hours of dedicated practice and supported by generous mentorship from those who recognized her potential before she fully believed in it herself. The coastal residency program at Cedar Point Art Center stretched along 3 miles of pristine North Carolina shoreline, where ancient live oaks, draped in Spanish moss, created natural studios for artists working in disciplines ranging from sculpture to printmaking. Sophia arrived in early September with 2 suitcases and a carefully packed collection of pottery tools, prepared to spend 3 months pushing her ceramic work into entirely new territory under the guidance of internationally recognized masters. The opportunity represented the kind of artistic development that could transform promising regional talent into nationally competitive professional status. Her assigned studio occupied a converted lighthouse keeper's cottage with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the workspace with the shifting light patterns reflected off ocean water. The building's previous inhabitants had shaped its architecture around maritime rhythms, creating rooms that flowed naturally from one function to another while maintaining constant visual connection to the sea. Unlike the mountain views that had inspired her Asheville work, this coastal environment demanded different responses to light, color, and the organic forms that emerged from tidal cycles and salt air weathering. The residency cohort included 12 artists selected from hundreds of applications nationwide, representing diverse backgrounds and artistic approaches that promised intense creative cross-pollination during their shared months of concentrated work. A glass artist from Seattle brought expertise in high-temperature kilns and color chemistry that opened new possibilities for ceramic surface treatments. A textile artist from Maine contributed knowledge of natural dye processes that could be adapted for pottery glazing. A metal worker from Arizona shared techniques for incorporating copper and silver elements into fired clay bodies. Dr. Margaret Chen, the residency's ceramic instructor, had spent 4 decades developing glazing techniques that captured the subtle color variations found in natural phenomena like aurora displays and deep ocean currents. Her approach to teaching emphasized systematic experimentation combined with intuitive responses to material properties, encouraging students to develop personal aesthetic voices while mastering technical foundations that could support ambitious artistic vision. Her critique sessions were legendary for their precision and insight, capable of identifying breakthrough directions that students hadn't recognized in their own work. The first month of residency focused on technical expansion through intensive workshops that covered advanced throwing techniques, alternative firing methods, and experimental approaches to surface decoration that pushed beyond traditional ceramic boundaries. Sophia found herself working with clay bodies she'd never encountered, learning to adjust throwing techniques for porcelain's plasticity differences compared to the stoneware clays she'd mastered in Asheville. The learning curve was steep, but exhilarating, opening possibilities she hadn't imagined during her mountain apprenticeship. Sagre firing became Sophia's obsession during the coastal residency, a technique that created unique surface effects by enclosing pottery pieces with combustible materials inside sealed containers during the firing process. The method produced unpredictable color patterns and textures that couldn't be replicated through conventional glazing, making each piece genuinely one of a kind while requiring careful documentation of material combinations that yielded successful results. The process felt like collaborative creation between artist intention and natural forces beyond human control. Chen recognized Sophia's intuitive understanding of how coastal environment could influence ceramic work, encouraging her to collect materials from beach walks for incorporation into her firing experiment. Seaweed, driftwood, salt crystals and sand created distinctive markings when burned against clay surfaces, while shells and coral fragments left subtle impressions that echoed the oceanic themes emerging in Sophia's work. The connection between place and artistic expression deepened through direct material relationships, rather than purely visual inspiration. The business mentorship component of the residency program connected Sophia with gallery directors, museum curators, and collectors, who provided insights into professional art markets that extended far beyond regional craft fairs and tourist sales. These conversations revealed the complex ecosystem of reputation building, critical recognition, and sustained career development that distinguished serious artists from talented hobbyists. The knowledge was both encouraging and intimidating, suggesting possibilities Sophia had never seriously considered while also highlighting the dedication required for national-level success. Gallery director Jonathan Walsh from Charleston's prestigious Meridian Gallery visited the residency during its second month, reviewing work from all participants, while offering private consultations about professional development strategy. His assessment of Sophia's ceramic evolution noted the distinctive integration of technical mastery with authentic artistic vision that marked artists ready for serious gallery representation. His invitation to participate in a group exhibition of emerging Southeastern artists represented a significant step toward broader recognition and commercial viability. The exhibition opportunity required producing a cohesive body of work that demonstrated both artistic maturity and market appeal, challenging Sophia to move beyond individual piece creation toward developing thematic series that could anchor gallery shows and museum exhibitions. Her coastal-inspired work had evolved into exploration of transformation themes that resonated with her personal journey while appealing to broader audiences navigating their own life transition. The pieces spoke to universal experiences of change, resilience, and renewal through forms and surfaces that captured natural processes of erosion and reconstruction. Collaborative projects with other residency artists expanded Sophia's understanding of how different creative disciplines could inform and enhance ceramic work. A partnership with the textile artist resulted in pottery pieces incorporating fabric impressions that created complex surface textures evoking both clay traditions and fiber arts heritage. Work with the glass artist led to experimental pieces that combined ceramic vessels with blown glass elements, creating hybrid forms that challenged conventional boundaries between crafts disciplines. The residency's visiting artist lecture series brought internationally recognized ceramicists, whose work and career paths provided roadmaps for sustainable artistic practice at the highest level. Japanese master Kenji Yamamoto demonstrated Rocco firing techniques that had been refined through generations of family tradition, while contemporary innovator Sarah Blackwood showed how ancient pottery methods could address current environmental concerns through sustainable material sourcing and energy-efficient firing practices. These presentations revealed pottery's potential for addressing contemporary issues while maintaining connection to historical crafts tradition. Sophia's development during the coastal residency accelerated beyond anything she could have achieved through solitary studio practice, even with Rosa's excellent mentorship. The combination of technical instruction, peer interaction, professional guidance, and uninterrupted time for creative exploration created conditions that compressed years of gradual learning into months of intensive growth. Her work evolved from competent regional pottery toward distinctive artistic expression that could compete in national markets, while maintaining authentic connection to her personal transformation narrative. The critique process at Cedar Point operated at levels of sophistication that initially overwhelmed Sophia but gradually built her capacity for analytical thinking about artistic choices and their broader implications. Doc Chen's evaluations addressed not just technical execution but conceptual clarity, market positioning, and the long-term artistic development strategies that would sustain creative careers through inevitable periods of challenge and change. Learning to articulate artistic intentions and respond constructively to professional criticism proved as valuable as any technical skills acquired during the residency. By November, Sophia's work had attracted attention from other residency programs, including an invitation to participate in an international ceramics symposium in France that would connect her with European traditions and contemporary innovations in pottery practice. The opportunity represented both artistic validation and practical challenges, requiring financial planning and business development strategies that could support international travel and extended periods away from income-generating activities in Asheville. The final month of residency focused on exhibition preparation and professional development planning that would help participants transition from intensive learning environment back to independent studio practice. Sophia's portfolio now included documentation of technical processes, artist statements that articulated her aesthetic vision, and professional photographs that presented her work according to gallery and museum standards. The transformation from enthusiastic beginner to serious professional artist had occurred through systematic development of both creative and business capabilities. Rosa and Carlos visited Cedar Point during the final week of Sophia's residency, their assessment of her artistic growth reflecting both pride in her achievements and recognition that her development had progressed beyond what their Asheville studio could provide independently. Conversations about her future role in their operation evolved toward partnership arrangements that would allow Sophia to maintain her mountain connections while pursuing national exhibition opportunities and commission work that required advanced technical capability. The partnership proposal involved Sophia establishing a satellite studio space that could accommodate larger-scale work and experimental firing techniques, while maintaining access to Rosa's established customer base and business infrastructure. The arrangement would provide financial stability during her transition to professional status, while allowing artistic growth that could benefit all participants through shared knowledge and cross-promotional opportunity. The collaborative relationship represented evolution from traditional master-apprentice dynamics toward genuine creative partnership between equals. Returning to Asheville after 3 months of coastal immersion, Sophia experienced the mountain landscape with fresh perspective, gained through extensive exposure to different environments and artistic approaches. The familiar studios and galleries now felt like components of a broader creative ecosystem, rather than the complete universe of possibilities she'd originally perceived.
Her work carried influences from ocean tides and salt air weathering, while maintaining connection to mountain wildflower themes and regional craft traditions. The legal resolution of her divorce had concluded during her absence, with settlement terms that exceeded Maria Santos's initial projections, while confirming Derek's pattern of vindictive behavior throughout the proceedings. The financial compensation would provide stability during her transition to professional artist status, including funds for studio expansion and equipment purchases that could support ambitious projects requiring specialized tools and materials. More importantly, the legal closure eliminated remaining emotional ties to her previous life, allowing complete focus on artistic development and business growth. Derek's reaction to news of Sophia's artistic achievements and growing recognition revealed the depth of his need to diminish her accomplishments, rather than acknowledge his role in nearly preventing their realization. His attempts to characterize her success as lucky accident or temporary phase reflected the same dismissive attitude that had characterized their marriage, confirming her decision to prioritize personal growth over relationship preservation. The contrast between his continuing bitterness and her expanding creative fulfillment highlighted the wisdom of choosing authentic independence over comfortable dependence. Priya Patel had used Sophia's residency absence to build anticipation for her return exhibition, creating marketing materials that positioned her as an emerging artist whose coastal work represented significant evolution beyond her established mountain themes. The gallery's commitment to featuring Sophia's work exclusively during the peak holiday shopping season reflected confidence in both her artistic merit and commercial appeal. The exhibition would test her readiness for professional status, while providing income that could support continued artistic development. The installation of Sophia's coastal-inspired work at Priya's gallery created visual dialogue between pieces that individually demonstrated technical mastery
while collectively expressing artistic vision that transcended pure craftsmanship. The Sagar-fired vessels displayed surface effects that seemed to capture ocean wave patterns and shoreline erosion processes, while maintaining functional integrity that made them appealing to collectors seeking both aesthetic beauty and practical utility. The pricing reflected Sophia's emerging professional status while remaining accessible to regional collectors. Opening night drew crowds that exceeded the gallery's capacity, including collectors from as far away as Atlanta and Washington, who had learned about Sophia's work through professional networks activated during her residency experience. Sales began immediately and continued throughout the evening, with several pieces purchased by museums for their permanent collection. The commercial success validated market assessments made during the residency while providing financial foundation for continued artistic development and business expansion. Critical response to the exhibition appeared in regional art publications that positioned Sophia's work within broader conversations about contemporary ceramics and the role of place-based inspiration in artistic development. Reviews noted the sophistication of her technical execution, combined with authentic artistic vision that avoided both superficial regionalism and generic contemporary trends. The recognition established her reputation beyond local craft circles, while maintaining connection to the mountain community that had nurtured her initial development. Commission inquiries following the exhibition's success included requests for large-scale installation pieces that would challenge Sophia to work at scales requiring substantial studio space and specialized equipment. A luxury resort development near Asheville requested ceramic architectural elements that would integrate with landscape design while demonstrating regional artistic excellence. A private collector commissioned a series of vessels inspired by specific North Carolina state parks, requiring travel and documentation that would expand Sophia's artistic territory beyond her established coastal and mountain theme. The scope of opportunities emerging from her exhibition success required business planning that went beyond individual piece creation toward establishing sustainable creative enterprise capable of handling complex projects while maintaining artistic quality standards. Conversations with Carlos about studio expansion evolved into comprehensive planning for production capabilities, staff requirement, and marketing strategies that could support ambitious growth while preserving the authentic character that distinguished Sophia's work from commercial pottery production. Professional recognition had created demand that exceeded Sophia's current capacity for individual production, necessitating decisions about scaling operations, while maintaining the handcrafted quality that collectors value. Training assistants in specialized techniques, while preserving artistic integrity, represented challenges that successful studio ceramicists had navigated for generations, requiring business acumen alongside artistic vision. The transition from individual maker to creative entrepreneur demanded skills that extended far beyond pottery technique. The winter months following her exhibition triumph provided time for reflection on the remarkable transformation that had occurred since Derek's betrayal had forced her departure from Denver. The woman who had once apologized for having creative interests now negotiated museum acquisitions and planned international exhibition participation. Her success felt both earned through dedicated effort and miraculous in its scope, exceeding possibilities she'd imagined during those desperate early weeks of rebuilding her life from nothing. Mountain winters created ideal conditions for intensive studio work without the distractions of tourist season activities and social obligations that summer brought to Asheville's arts community. Sophia used the quiet months to develop new techniques and prepare work for upcoming exhibitions, while planning studio expansion that would accommodate the larger-scale projects her growing reputation attracted. The combination of creative development and business growth felt sustainable in ways that her previous dependence on Derek's income never had. Sophia's artistic development had reached levels that commanded respect from established masters, while maintaining connection to the authentic personal experience that made her work compelling to diverse audiences. Her pieces spoke to universal themes of transformation and resilience, while displaying technical excellence that satisfied demanding collectors and curators. The integration of emotional depth with professional competence marked artistic maturity that could sustain lifelong creative practice at the highest levels of recognition and commercial success. The Denver Art Museum's invitation arrived on a February morning that dawned crisp and brilliant, casting sharp shadows across the snow-dusted peaks visible from Sophia's expanded studio window. The prestigious institution was organizing a major exhibition titled Transformed Contemporary Artists, Redefining Traditional Crafts, scheduled to open in 18 months, and curator Dr. Rachel Morrison had selected Sophia as one of 12 artists whose work would represent the evolution of American ceramics in the 21st century. The honor represented the pinnacle of recognition for any contemporary potter, placing her work alongside masters whose careers had spanned decades of dedicated practice and innovation. The exhibition would require producing a substantial body of new work specifically for the museum's gallery, pieces that demonstrated both technical mastery and conceptual sophistication appropriate for an institution whose collections included ancient ceramics from civilizations across the globe. The opportunity represented validation of everything Sophia had achieved during her transformation from abandoned corporate wife to nationally recognized artist. But it also demanded creative and logistical planning that would test every skill she'd developed during her journey toward professional independence. Preparation for such a significant exhibition required expanding her studio operation beyond anything she'd previously contemplated, including specialized equipment for large-scale work and additional workspace for the assistants who would help execute her ambitious vision. The financial investment represented a calculated risk that could either establish her permanently among American ceramics' leading practitioners or create debt that would constrain her artistic freedom for years to come. The decision required confidence in her abilities and market assessment that went far beyond anything Derek had ever encouraged her to consider. Carlos had spent weeks developing business projections that demonstrated how the museum exhibition could anchor Sophia's transition to the highest levels of professional success, while providing sustainable income through increased gallery representation and commission opportunity. His analysis revealed that success at this level required treating artistic practice as serious business enterprise, rather than romantic pursuit of creative fulfillment. The numbers were encouraging but demanded commitments that would fundamentally change how Sophia approached her work and career planning. The studio expansion began in March with construction that would triple her workspace while adding specialized areas for large-scale throwing, experimental firing techniques, and the careful documentation that museum-quality work required. The renovation disrupted her established routines while creating anticipation for the enhanced capabilities that new equipment and facilities would provide. Watching contractors transform the familiar space felt like witnessing the final phase of her personal transformation from amateur enthusiast to serious professional artist. Derek's unexpected appearance at the construction site on a Thursday afternoon in late March created the kind of confrontation Sophia had hoped to avoid, but perhaps needed to experience before completing her journey toward complete independence. He stood beside his familiar Mercedes, surveying the construction activity with the same disapproving expression he'd once directed toward her creative interests during their marriage. 2 years had changed him less than they had transformed her, though his expensive clothing couldn't hide the subtle signs of stress and dissatisfaction that suggested his life with Natalie hadn't provided the fulfillment he'd expected. His presence felt surreal against the backdrop of her expanded studio and the mountain landscape that had become her sanctuary. The man who had once dismissed her pottery as expensive hobby now confronted evidence of artistic success that exceeded anything his corporate career had achieved. The contrast between his static life and her dynamic growth created an emotional distance that made his familiar manipulation tactics feel powerless and irrelevant. Derek's initial approach attempted the charm that had once masked his controlling behavior, expressing admiration for her apparent success while suggesting that her achievements vindicated his decision to encourage her creative interests during their marriage. The revisionist history ignored years of discouragement and the cruel abandonment that had forced her independence, but Sophia recognized the pattern of taking credit for accomplishments he'd actively opposed. His need to maintain narrative control revealed insecurities that her success had apparently intensified rather than resolved. The conversation that followed demonstrated how completely Sophia had outgrown the dynamics that had defined their relationship. Derek's attempts to position himself as supportive former husband were met with calm acknowledgement of facts rather than emotional responses to his manipulation. When he suggested that her artistic success might provide foundation for renewed relationship, Sophia's rejection was gentle but absolute, based on incompatible life philosophies rather than lingering anger about past betrayal. Derek's true purpose became clear when he mentioned his recent divorce from Natalie and suggested that their shared history provided basis for reconsidering their separation. His assumption that Sophia's success was a temporary phase that would eventually lead her back to conventional marriage revealed how little he understood about the fundamental changes that had occurred in her identity and priority. The woman he'd abandoned in Italy no longer existed, replaced by someone whose confidence and independence made his approval irrelevant. Rosa emerged from the studio during Derek's visit, her presence providing silent support while observing the interaction between Sophia and her former husband. The older woman's protective stance and obvious pride in Sophia's achievements created striking contrast with Derek's dismissive attitude toward the mountain community that had nurtured Sophia's transformation. His inability to recognize the value of relationships built on mutual respect and shared creative passion highlighted the shallow foundations that had undermined their marriage. When Derek finally departed, his expensive car disappearing down the mountain road like a relic from a life Sophia could barely remember living, she felt profound gratitude rather than relief. His visit had provided opportunity to test the strength of her new identity against the manipulation tactics that had once controlled her choices. The complete absence of temptation to reconsider their relationship confirmed that her transformation was permanent rather than reactive, based on authentic self-discovery rather than anger at his betrayal. The museum exhibition preparation intensified through spring and summer as Sophia developed thematic series that would anchor her contribution to the Denver show. The pieces explored concepts of resilience and renewal through forms that referenced both natural processes and human experiences of rebuilding after destruction. Ancient pottery techniques combined with contemporary innovations created works that honored ceramic traditions while addressing current concerns about environmental sustainability and personal authenticity. The largest pieces in her museum series required firing techniques that pushed her expanded studio's capabilities to their limits, while demanding physical strength and endurance that demonstrated how completely her body had adapted to pottery's demand. The woman who had once struggled with basic centering now handled massive amounts of clay with confidence and precision that impressed even Rosa, whose own mastery had been developed through decades of dedicated practice. Dr. Morrison's studio visit in August provided crucial feedback on work in progress while offering insights into museum exhibition strategies that could maximize impact of Sophia's contribution. The curator's enthusiasm for pieces that successfully bridged traditional craft practices with contemporary artistic vision confirmed that Sophia's instincts about thematic development were leading toward work of genuine significance. The validation from such a respected authority provided confidence for the final months of preparation. International recognition arrived through invitations to demonstrate techniques at ceramic conferences in Japan and Germany, opportunities that would establish Sophia's reputation within global communities of pottery practitioners while providing inspiration for future artistic development. The prospect of sharing knowledge with masters whose traditions stretched back centuries felt both humbling and empowering, evidence that her rapid development had achieved levels worthy of such distinguished company. The business aspects of Sophia's expanding career required legal and financial planning that went far beyond anything she'd needed during her marriage to Derek. Patent applications for innovative firing techniques, licensing agreements for educational institutions, and insurance coverage for valuable artwork demanded expertise that Carlos provided while connecting her with specialists in intellectual property and arts law. The complexity felt overwhelming at times, but represented the kind of problems that successful artists were privileged to navigate. Teaching opportunities emerged as recognition of Sophia's expertise spread through professional networks, including invitations to conduct workshops at prestigious ceramic centers across the country. The chance to share knowledge with developing artists provided deep satisfaction while generating income that could support continued experimentation and business growth. Her teaching style emphasized technical precision, combined with encouragement of individual artistic vision, reflecting the mentorship she'd received from Rosa while adapting to her own personality and experience. The final months before the Denver exhibition opening brought both creative culmination and practical challenges that tested every aspect of Sophia's professional development. Shipping museum-quality ceramic pieces required specialized packaging and transportation that protected fragile artwork while meeting insurance requirements that reflected their substantial value. The logistics alone represented complexity that amateur artists never encountered, demanding business sophistication alongside artistic accomplishment. October brought the installation process at Denver Art Museum, where Sophia worked with professional preparators to position her pieces within galleries designed to showcase contemporary ceramics alongside historical examples from cultures around the world. Seeing her work displayed in such prestigious context provided emotional validation that exceeded any financial success or critical recognition she'd achieved. The pottery that had emerged from clay and fire in her mountain studio now stood alongside masterpieces that would inspire future generations of artists. The exhibition opening drew crowds that included collectors, critics, and fellow artists, whose presence validated the significance of the event while creating networking opportunities that could sustain Sophia's career development for decades to come. Conversations with established masters, emerging artists, and museum professionals provided insights into the broader ecosystem of contemporary ceramics, while building relationships that transcended geographical boundaries. Critical response to the exhibition positions Sophia's work among the most significant contributions, with reviews noting the sophistication of her technical execution, combined with authentic artistic vision that avoided both superficial innovation and nostalgic traditionalism. The recognition established her reputation at levels that attracted interest from major galleries and collectors, while providing foundation for sustained career growth that could support lifetime artistic practice. Sales from the exhibition exceeded all projections, while leading to commission inquiries that would occupy Sophia's studio for years to come. The financial success provided security that allowed artistic risk-taking without concern for immediate commercial viability, creating conditions for continued creative development that could push ceramics into new territory. The freedom felt revolutionary for someone who had once depended entirely on another person's financial support and approval. The transformation that had begun with Derek's cruel abandonment in Italy had culminated in achievements that exceeded anything Sophia could have imagined during those desperate early weeks of rebuilding her life from nothing. The woman who had once apologized for having creative interests now commanded respect from international art communities while building business enterprises that provided sustainable independence. Success felt both earned through dedicated effort and miraculous in its scope. Returning to Asheville after the exhibition triumph, Sophia found herself viewing the mountain landscape that had sheltered her transformation with profound gratitude for the community that had made her success possible. Rosa and Carlos had provided more than technical instruction and business guidance. They had offered the unconditional support that allowed authentic self-discovery during the most vulnerable period of her life. Their investment in her development had been repaid through shared success and the deep satisfaction of witnessing artistic potential reach full realization. The studio that had once seemed impossibly ambitious now felt like natural expression of capabilities she'd always possessed but never been encouraged to develop. Equipment that had once intimidated her with its complexity now responded to her direction, like extensions of her own hands, shaped by thousands of hours of practice into tools for creating beauty and meaning. The mastery felt both surprising and inevitable, built through systematic development of skills that marriage to Derek had almost prevented her from discovering. Helen Chang's final therapy session focused on integration of everything Sophia had achieved during her journey from abandoned wife to accomplished artist. The conversation revealed how completely she had healed from betrayal trauma while building identity based on authentic interests and capabilities rather than another person's expectation. The strength she'd developed through necessity had become foundation for choices that honored her true nature rather than accommodating someone else's limitations. Plans for the coming year included international exhibitions, educational collaborations, and artistic challenges that would continue pushing Sophia's work into unexplored territory. The momentum generated by museum recognition provided launching pad for projects that could influence contemporary ceramics while establishing her permanently among the field's leading innovators. The future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities that were entirely her own to pursue. The woman who had once lay perfectly still pretending to sleep while her husband betrayed their marriage, now slept peacefully in a home filled with her own artwork, surrounded by friends who valued her authentic self, confident in abilities that had been tested through years of dedicated development. Derek's cruelty had accidentally set her free to discover capabilities she'd never known she possessed, transforming intended punishment into unexpected gift of complete liberation. The final lesson of Sophia's transformation was that authentic strength emerged, not from avoiding betrayal and hardship, but from choosing growth over bitterness, when life's inevitable challenges demanded response. Her success hadn't erased the pain of Derek's abandonment, but had transformed it into fuel for becoming someone stronger and more capable than she'd ever been within the constraints of their marriage. The pottery that emerged from her hands now carried stories of resilience that inspired everyone who encountered her work. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals reveal the greatest gifts hiding within ourselves, waiting for circumstances that force us to choose between settling for less or reaching for everything we were meant to become. Sophia Rodriguez had chosen to reach, and in doing so had discovered that the person Derek had tried to diminish possessed unlimited capacity for growth, creativity, and independence that no one else could ever take away again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.